What's going on, my friends? Bryan Hardy here, nutritionist and holistic health coach, to help you optimize your digestion and recover from whatever it is that is keeping you down, keeping you not feeling like yourself. Now, today I want to talk about something that is very, very, very important, something that impacts all of us. Something that you might hear thrown around a lot, this term thrown around very loosely and without a lot of clarification to what's actually going on. And to also get some people, some doctors and medical professionals who claim that this thing doesn't even exist. So I'm here to tell you that it's real, that it can be affecting you in a majorly negative way. It's something we all need to be aware of and on guard for, and it's very likely a part of your own digestive healing picture. So today we're going to break down what exactly is leaky gut, how it appears, how it occurs, some things we can do to start to peel back the layers of dysfunction and get you feeling better. So stay tuned for the whole video because it's going to be a good one. Okay, my friends. Yes, leaky gut. Leaky gut. That's what we're talking about today. Now, I know the term is quite disgusting, and nobody wants to think about having a leaky gut based on what that implies. It's like, is food going through my stomach into my body? Like, is there poop in my bloodstream? Is there parasites in my system? What's going on here? There's so many things related to leaky gut. So many people will post about it. You'll see, experts posting about how to fix or how to cure or top 5 causes or whatever it might be. But you'll also have medical doctors denying that it exists, which to me is absolute insanity. Because if you look up the scientific literature and use the scientific term, intestinal permeability, there is no debate. It is very clear that intestinal permeability exists, and it's a real thing, and it has many causes, and it has a lot to do with different disease processes, whether it's IBS or IBD or chronic illness of any kind. Could also be autoimmune illness, things like Hashimoto's, things like rheumatoid arthritis, you name it, it's involved. So we're going to break down what it really is. We're going to talk about why it's caused, or some of the most common causes. And then we're going to talk about some of the simple ways you can start to turn the picture around and start to remove those levels of stress from your system. So, leaky gut. What is it? Intestinal permeability. What is it really? So, it practically, in all practical purposes, leaky gut just means that you have a gap that's bigger than it should be, because throughout and we're talking about the small intestine here, right? We're not necessarily talking about the stomach, because if you have a leaky gut in your stomach, that's called an ulcer. And that is going to be a big issue, because your stomach has a lot of very, very corrosive acid in it. And if you had an actual hole, that would mean you had no mucous membrane protecting the stomach, and that the acid would eat right into that hole. So that's called an ulcer. That is not a leaky gut from this term. So intestinal permeability, we're talking about the small intestine, so the very long, loopy, bendy, foldy, over on itself many times, massive surface area organ of the GI tract that comes after the stomach and before the colon. Now, the cell lining of this tube, which it's basically a tube, hollow tube that runs through our body, the lining that allows for nutrients to be absorbed is only one cell wall thick. So unlike our skin, right, which I've got like many, many, many layers of epidermis and dermis and, superficial connective tissues and fatty layers. There's many layers on my skin. This protects me if a knife comes or a punch comes or a rock hits me or any sort of thing that could break my skin and compromise this barrier. Right? I have many layers. It's tough. It's meant for the outdoors. That's how we're built. Now, inside, it's a different story. Inside, we have one cell layer, and a cell is very, 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 very tiny. This means we have virtually no excess protection. We have just enough protection to keep us safe in the natural world and not enough protection to deal with the onslaught of stresses that are so common in the modern world. So why is this a problem? Well, because when we are exposed to certain things that we know disrupt that intestinal barrier, we then are prone to pieces of proteins, amino acids, getting through those gaps, getting through those leaks, and getting into our bloodstream and causing havoc to our immune system, because our immune system, which has white blood cells floating around doing their job, cleaning up the bad guys, the immune system might identify these foreign proteins and attack them. Sometimes in the case of gluten or in the case of casein, there's other examples as well, but those are the most common examples. In those cases, they can sometimes resemble proteins in our own bodies. So instead of attack the invader protein from the leaky gut, then autoimmunity is essentially the immune system is attacking its own proteins, its own tissues. Now, I'm not sure if I actually agree with this theory of autoimmunity. I think that the more updated version, which looks more at that the immune system is trying to attack pathogens, parasites, viruses, fungi, whatever. It's trying to get rid of those, which are also linked with toxicity. And in doing so, it can appear that it's causing damage. But the immune system, and it makes intuitive sense to me, that the immune system would not attack itself. That seems like a very counterproductive function and feature that doesn't make sense, and like it's very anti-life if we think that the immune system is attacking itself. Now, I'm not an autoimmunity expert by any means. I have experienced those conditions myself, and it runs in my family, so I've got that much experience and expertise, but it's not my main area of focus. That said, because we have these conditions going on which are linked to this leaky gut, then it creates a problem. It creates a problem because if we have constant immune stimulation and immune response every time we eat a piece of wheat, for instance, which is, like I said, the most common thing that's going to trigger people in this way, then our body's never going to relax. Our body's never going to heal. Our body's never going to properly deal with the stress that it has building up, because it's always on emergency mode. It's always in a fight or flight or panic response, right? And in those states, the body slowly declines. Slowly, bit by bit. It's a slow decline until we stop that process and turn things around. Now, the other thing that is going on here and what's causing this leaky gut to happen could be many issues. Some of the most prevalent in today's world would be things like glyphosate, herbicides, and pesticides. And I honestly think that gluten is more due, the issues with gluten are more due to glyphosate exposure that's sprayed on so many grains and ends up in so many foods. And we know that it disrupts the gut microbiome and pokes holes in our intestinal wall. So we know that's a big issue. Probably the biggest issue, the biggest single issue is exposure to those chemicals that will cause that damage. Other things you might not think about are intense exercise. So if you are intensely exercising, primarily if it's a very, very hot place, so if you are intensely exercising in a very, very hot place, like you're doing endurance athletics or you're doing a crazy CrossFit workout or you're fasted and you're working out and it's like brutally hot outside, in those situations, you can actually have exercise-induced intestinal permeability. And this is why a lot of athletes tend to have really bad digestive issues, is because they are chronically stressing themselves due to the intensity of their workout. And then they go from that straight into eating a massive meal, right? So you go from stressed out, inflamed, leaky gut to eating a massive meal. And your gut might not have the time to replace that cell layer before that food comes down. So now you have like a fresh wound and all this fresh food with the potential, particularly if you're eating inflammatory foods, those things are going to have the potential to then trigger that immune response and trigger that draining, fatigue-inducing, pain-inducing, immune system stressing response. And thus the cycle begins and is perpetuated. So exercise intensely can actually harm the gut lining. Who would have thought? Of course, you can have things like parasites, pathogens, yeasts of different kinds, bacteria of different kinds. These can all disrupt the cell lining, the cell wall lining of the intestines. You can also have things like alcohol, right, which we know is toxic, and yet we still imbibe it as a libation or as a recreational substance or as a medicinal substance. But excess alcohol can really disrupt the lining of the intestines. Go figure. It's kind of like a corrosive, toxic thing. Of course, it's going to have an effect, especially if you're drinking a lot on an empty stomach. So that said, if you've ever had the experience where after a night of binge drinking, you woke up and your gut felt really wrong, really raw, and really inflamed, and then you might have gone from there and had a big, greasy, heavy toast and bacon and eggs kind of breakfast, then you likely have experienced alcohol-induced leaky gut issues. Now, I know for myself, it was really the last straw was when I was in university and me and my friends threw a keg party, and I proceeded to drink way too much beer, way too much. I didn't even like beer, but it's like, we're doing a keg party, we got to drink a lot of beer. Way too much beer, passed out super early, didn't have that good of a time. Woke up the next day because I didn't eat anything and I didn't drink water. Those are like the two keys to not feeling hungover, right? You eat something to sop up the alcohol. Pizza was my go-to back then. And you drink like a bottle of water, like at least one full bottle of water. Now, I didn't do that because I passed out. So I wake up the next morning and my gut just feels raw, just feels terrible. Which is also the same day that my eyes started twitching, which I later realized was a magnesium deficiency, which magnesium is something that alcohol also depletes. So that was my really first-hand experience with like alcohol-induced leaky gut. And that's also when I realized that the candida issues that I was having were out of control, and that I had really pushed myself over the edge with that night of drinking. And that's where I had to really get serious about my own health and healing. And I started doing a very strict protocol to eliminate all of those potential sources of toxins and to support my system the best I could. And the last thing I want to mention here is that actually improperly prepared foods that aren't necessarily toxic or sprayed with chemicals or contain gluten or dairy, anything like that, but something like beans or lentils or whole grain rice or whole grains of any kinds, or beans and legumes of any kind. These things, if they are not soaked properly and then rinsed properly and then either sprouted or germinated as an ideal, or like pressure cooked, so cooked the crap out of these things. If we don't take those steps to fully render those things, seeds, nuts, grains, legumes, to fully render those things digestible by doing those processes, then we are going to be consuming a lot of anti-nutrients. These are like plant chemicals, chemical warfare in a sense, that it will send out to attack our system, to help it to get through, pass out of our bowel movement and become another plant, right? To plant its seed in our fertilizer. So if you eat a lot of grains, if you eat a lot of beans, if you're eating a lot of these nuts and seeds type of foods and they're raw or they are improperly prepared, that very well can cause chronic inflammation of your intestinal tract and thus leaky gut. So what do we do about it? Well, it depends on the case and the particular circumstances that the individual is in. Someone who has parasites is going to have a different approach than someone who is just binge eating gluten and is having, massive glyphosate exposures. There's going to be commonalities. There's going to be a lot of differences in terms of herbs, supplements, even foods, things that are tuned toward their system, right? That's what we do in our program, is tune things towards your system, right? We tune into your body so we're getting the right custom combination of foods and herbs and supplements. So that said, what are some things that I can say with high confidence are likely to be beneficial? At least they're not going to be harmful, but they're likely to be beneficial. Now, of course, the first is to remove yes, remove those foods, those gluten-containing grains, those non-organic breads and pastas and grains and seeds and nuts, all those things that are going to have pesticides and herbicides on them. You got to remove those things, right? You need to take away the toxic aspect so that the system can start to heal. So removing those things is number one. The next thing to do would be, if you do determine that you have some sort of a pathogenic overgrowth or parasitic infection, is then obviously to address that infection, and to do so, in my preference, with a mix of anti-parasitic, antibacterial, anti-pathogenic herbs and sometimes mushrooms and supplements that are less likely to have really bad side effects and more likely to actually kill those things that you want to kill without ruining your system in the process. And outside of that, I hesitate to give too much in terms of specific nutrients or supplements or foods or herbs, but one thing that I found is quite universal, and that is bone broth, right? So a proper, regular old, and it doesn't even have to just be from the bones. You can also throw some meat into this sort of a stock, a meat stock they call that, but you want to get whatever the best quality bones you've got. Chicken bones and chicken feet tend to be extra high in collagen, so that can help to support this process. But any broth will do. So keep it clean, keep it organic, keep it grass-fed, free range whenever possible, and make it, you can make it as simple as you want. It can just be literally, the bones simmered, maybe with a bit of apple cider vinegar and a bit of sea salt, and you just cook that down and enjoy it and sip it 1 to 2 cups a day. It's going to not necessarily get to the root of the issue, because you might have an infection of some sort, but it will offer some protection and some support and some ability to soothe your system, right? There's a reason that grandmothers and mothers all over the globe cook chicken soup or cook different kinds of bone and meat soups for their sick children and grandchildren. Is because it works. It soothes, if I can speak, it soothes the gut. It gives you some very easy to digest amino acids and minerals, which are 2 essential components to any nutrition plan. And it is going to allow your immune system to take a bit of a break. So that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I brought some clarity into your world, and that if you're dealing with suspected leaky gut or other digestive issues, that this has made it clearer in your mind what is actually going on and what you actually need to be doing and avoiding. The not doing is more important almost than the doing, but to make clear what you should be doing and not doing in order to prevent any further damage. So I hope this has made it clear in terms of what you need to be doing, and more importantly, not doing, so that you can start to turn this thing around, and you can, at least stop your decline or slow your decline, right? Because if you're battling an illness or battling chronic disease or even battling what you think are kind of minor issues, you got to understand that you are on a hill, right? You're not on flat ground. Life is not flat ground. You're on a hill. You are now going up the hill against the flow. You have to push and exert yourself to get up there. So if you stop, or if you just allow things to linger, they're not just staying the same, they're actually getting worse and worse and worse and worse, until you hit a crisis point like myself, which is best avoided, to say the least, right? I really, really, really want the work I do to be able to catch people before they hit a crisis point, so they can turn things around on their own, and prevent that from ever happening, right? If you have the right information, if you have the right tools, if you have the right support system, then these things are all totally within your control to recover from and to continually improve your health in these ways. So that's all I got to say. If this resonated with you, definitely drop a comment and subscription down below. Let me know what you liked. Let me know what you want to learn more about. And if you happen to find yourself really struggling with your digestive health and you suspect something like leaky gut or parasites or IBS or IBD, something to do with your gut that's not right, then go ahead and click the link below to book in a free consultation with myself, and we can dive through your history, see where you're at, see where you want to go, and see if it makes sense to work together. So that's all I got to say. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Have yourself a beautiful, fantastic, and healthy evening, and I'll catch you soon.